This video is going to go over how to draw covalent compound Lewis structures. So, first step is we need to draw the Lewis dot symbols for the atoms that we have in the compound. So we're going to start with CO2. We need the periodic table for this. Carbon is in group 4, so it's going to have 4 valence electrons. Oxygen is in group 6, so it's going to have 6 valence electrons. And then what we're going to do is we're going to count how many electrons we have. So what's our total valence electron count? We're going to use the formula to figure out how many atoms we have. We have 1 carbon, 2 oxygens, and then we're going to multiply by how many valence electrons we have. So carbon is in group 4, so we're going to multiply by 4. Oxygen is in group 6, so we're going to multiply by 6. This is going to be equal to 16. And then those single electrons tells you how many bonds each atom can make. So carbon can make 4 bonds, oxygen can make 2 bonds. The one that has more bonds is going to go in the middle, and the one that has less bonds is going to go on the outside. So carbon is going to go in the middle. Oxygen is going to go on the outside. I'm just going to add those in and fill in those lone pairs. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here and I'm going to count how many electrons I have. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 electrons. So it looks like I have all the electrons that I need, but if we look at what's happening here, carbon is only making 2 bonds right now to those oxygens. Carbon wants to make 4 bonds. Carbon is not happy right now. Oxygen is making a bond to carbon here, and then the oxygen on the right side is also making a bond to that oxygen. Right now, each one of those oxygens is only making 1 bond, so neither of those oxygens are happy. They want to make 2 bonds. What we can do is we can move these bonds over here so that they can be shared between those 2 atoms. So when we do that, it's going to look like this. Now the carbon has those 4 bonds, and then each oxygen has those 2 bonds. And we have the correct number of electrons. We used all the atoms, so that is the final structure. If we look at the next example, H2O, again, we're going to start by drawing those Lewis dot symbols. Hydrogen has 1 valence electron, so I'm going to just add 1 there. Oxygen has 6 because it's in group 6. And then remember, those single bonds tell you how many bonds each one can make. So hydrogen can make 1, oxygen can make 2. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to count my total number of valence electrons. So we have 2 hydrogens according to the formula, and we have 1 oxygen. And then we're going to multiply by how many valence electrons hydrogen has, which is 1. And we're going to multiply by how many valence electrons oxygen has, which is 6. So this is 2, 6 for a total of 8. So what we're going to do next, the atom that has the most bonds is going to go in the middle. So that's going to be oxygen. I'm just going to fill in the lone pairs. And then the one that has less bonds is going to go on the outside. That's going to be hydrogen. And then I'm just going to double check my work that I have all 8 electrons. So it's going to be 2, 4, 6, 8. So I have the correct number of electrons, the correct number of bonds for oxygen and for hydrogen. And I used up all my atoms. So this is done. That's the correct structure. For the next example, carbon is in group 4, so it's going to have 4 valence electrons. Hydrogen is in group 1, so it's going to have 1 valence electron. I'm going to count my total. I have in the formula 1 carbon, 4 oxygens, and then I'm going to multiply by how many valence electrons there are. So hydrogen is in group 1, so I'm going to multiply by 1. Carbon is in group 4, so I'm going to multiply by 4. So that's going to be 8 electrons, 8 valence electrons. Remember that those single bonds tell you how many bonds each one makes. So carbon makes 4 bonds, hydrogen 1. The one that makes more bonds is going to go in the middle. So I'm going to put carbon in the middle. I'm going to draw in those bonds, and then I'm going to add in those hydrogens. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to double check my electrons. I have 2, 4, 6, 8 electrons. I have the total number of electrons, 8. I have used all of the atoms, and carbon has 4 bonds. Hydrogen is only making 1 bond, so that one is done. We're ready to move on. The last one, C2H6, again, we're going to start by drawing the Lewis dot structure. Carbon is in group 4, so it's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. Hydrogen is in group 1, so it's going to have just one valence electron. I'm going to count my total, so I'm going to use the formula again. I have 2 carbons and 6 hydrogens, and I'm going to multiply that by how many valence electrons there are. So H in group 1, so it's going to have 1 valence electron. And then carbon is in group 4, so it's going to have 4 valence electrons. So that's 8 plus 6, it's going to be 14. Those single electrons tells us how many bonds we make. Carbon makes 4, hydrogen makes 1. And we're going to put the one that makes more bonds in the middle. And then we're going to add in those hydrogens. And then we're just going to double check our work. So this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 electrons. We have all of the electrons that we need. Each carbon is making 4 bonds. All of our hydrogens are making 1 bond, and we used up all of our atoms, so we're good to go. That is the final structure. That's how you draw Lewis structures for covalent compounds.